How you guys doing today? My name's Anthony Oliveira. I know I usually make rap videos, but today I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I will be discussing a topic about which I am very passionate. The topic for today is languages. Not just the general idea of languages so much, but more specifically, second language acquisition, or the act of learning another language, as it were. Typically, what you'll hear from a lot of people whenever they're sort of, trying to give advice for learning a language, whenever they come to the topic of language immersion, they're gonna say, "Oh, well, you need to book a flight to whatever country speaks the language you want to learn, and you need to stay there for a month, and you need to have a conversation about quantum physics with every physics professor in the country." Ugh. Now, I promise I'm not trying to knock that. I'm not trying to poke fun at anyone who says that, because I do agree with that to an extent. I do think actually going to a country that speaks the language you're trying to learn is very, very essential, but once you reach a certain level of expertise in that language, right? So it's not something that I would recommend just jumping into right off the bat. Also, there are other ways around that. So number one, you can watch movies in the language you want to learn, or you can watch movies in your native language that have subtitles in the language you want to learn. For instance, you can watch, if you're trying to learn Spanish, you can watch a Colombian movie in Spanish, and not only will you be exposing yourself to the language, or like the actual, I would say, native speech patterns of that language, right? So not just like a classroom setting, but how people actually speak who are native speakers of the language. You'll be exposing your brain to that, but even more, you'll also be exposing your brain to the culture, right? You'll also be exposing yourself to the culture of whatever country that movie's coming from, or whatever region. And number two, podcasts. I really like podcasts, and I'll explain why. So let's say, for instance, you want to learn, again, Spanish, and you want to not only learn Spanish, but you also want to understand the history of the countries that speak the Spanish language, or Latin American culture, or Spanish culture, or whatever. I think podcasts are a great way to do that, because podcasts oftentimes will talk about this sort of stuff. For instance, if you want to know more about the political climate, the current political climate, and again, in a Spanish-speaking country, if you're trying to learn Spanish, let's say you want to know more about the governmental structure in Latin American countries or Central American countries or something, and then you could tune into these podcasts, and you can listen to people who are native to that region actually like venting about what's going on in their country. And so when you do that, not only will you be learning about the current political climate, but you'll also be hearing, again, the native speech patterns. That's why, personally, I think podcasts are a really good way to go. Number three, music. So I'm not going to get on like a little rant or anything, but I really like this one because I think that it's very eye-opening for people. Before I get into why it's eye-opening, let me kind of give you a piece of advice before you just dive into listening to the music. Personally, I think it would behoove you to sort of come up with a strategy before you actually listen to the music. For instance, you look up a bunch of songs, or you look up a bunch of artists in the language you want to learn, and you're so excited, I really want to listen to them, they whatever, it seems really cool. And it should excite you. But I suggest listening to the music, yes, but also reading the lyrics in that language. Don't translate them, but reading the lyrics in that language and following along. Especially if you've have some sort of experience with the language before. So if you've learned it in high school or college or something, but you don't really consider yourself like fluent yet, when you listen to the song, let's say, again, Spanish, I'll use that as another example, and you're listening to a song in Spanish and you don't understand what they're saying, like you can't tell Spanish from Klingon, you know? But when you start reading the lyrics, it suddenly starts to make more sense. And it's because you've just never heard it spoken like that before, all right? It's not because you're an idiot or anything, but whenever you're reading along with it, you understand some of the words when you're reading, and when you're reading the word and you hear it being spoken, you're like, huh, I've never heard it said like that. Interesting. Right there is the key, because you're exposing your brain to how it's said by a native speaker. So the next time you're having a conversation or something in that language, and if, let's say, you're trying to say the word, you'll remember before you say it, I remember this artist said it like this. And then you begin to emulate, whatever. That's the goal right there, right? That's the key, is to get to a point where you've heard it so many times that you can begin to mimic how a native speaker would say it. And this is a very eye-opening experience for people, especially if you're an American, because as Americans, we tend to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. That's just kind of how our culture has been for a long time. So whenever you start looking up music from various regions of the world, you start to realize that, and I'm not trying to say this in a disrespectful tone or anything, or a condescending tone, but you start to realize that other regions have the same issues we have. When you start to learn more about the culture, you begin to appreciate the language so much more, because you start to think about the fact that this culture has its own unique set of problems. It has its own unique political climate. It has its own unique social infrastructure. It has its own unique set of iniquities. It has its own unique history. It's unique. And that's the important thing to realize. So I think learning more about the culture as you learn the language is an impeccable way to complement the acquisition of the language itself. Another good thing, no matter which one of these three things you decide to do, you'll be picking up on vocab, which is extremely important. For instance, I know a lot of people at the school I go to who were taking an entry-level foreign language class, and they're just so motivated to learn the language, man. Like, they just want to be able to say they're fluent in the language. They want to be able to have a conversation about anything in the language, and it's awesome. That really is awesome. I'll use Spanish as an example again, just because I happen to know a lot of people who take Spanish at the university. And I'll ask them, so how's your Spanish class going? And typically the response is something like, oh, well, it's going really well. I love Spanish. It's such an awesome language. Or they'll say something like, oh, yeah, I think it'll be really good once I get into my career, which that's okay too, if that's why you want to learn it. But then I'll ask them, so, like, has it been hard for you at all? And typically, one of the only things that has been hard for them, or that has been an obstacle, if you will, is the lack of vocabulary they have acquired. I've even known some people who, in a frustrated state, have decided to walk away from learning a language because they feel like they're just not making any progress. And typically, the progress that they feel like they're not making is the lack of vocabulary. If you watching this video feel that you're one of those people, you're learning a language, you know the verbs, you know the grammatical structure, but you just can't seem to get a grasp on the vocabulary. You just feel like you don't know enough vocab words to actually express how you feel about something. If that's you, and you're frustrated, I'm imploring you not to quit. I beg you not to quit. Keep going. It's hard, but I'm telling you, if you, again, not saying I'm an expert, but if you do take my advice here and you watch movies in the language you want to learn, and you're looking at the subtitles too when you don't understand something, and you're listening to podcasts, some of them you can find with subtitles as well on YouTube, and you're listening to music in the language you want to learn while you're reading the lyrics in that language. So you're hearing various words that, one, you've never heard before, which is great, and two, that you have heard before but never use in the way that you're hearing them used. And that's perfect. That you're literally growing your brain whenever you do that. If you do these things, I promise you it will come. The vocabulary will come. Say right now you come up with a plan. So for the next 3 months or something, your studying is gonna be, for the language, is gonna be 80% music, podcasts, and movies, and 20% conversation. And then slowly, the longer you study, the more words you're gonna acquire, and you're gonna realize, wow, I know a lot of these words. and then that 20% of conversation is gonna slowly keep moving, and then suddenly you're gonna realize that you can have conversations in the language, and you're gonna be like, oh my goodness, I can have a conversation in this language. The key here with the languages and acquiring the vocabulary is constant immersion. Again, I am not an expert. I am not a linguist. I am not a language professor. Okay? I'm not. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that. But I've learned languages. This is what has worked for me. This is just a very, very small little nugget like this big of what has worked for me. I've talked to other people. They've told me this is what has worked for them. So this is in no way a cure-all. No. Not in any way am I claiming that it is, but I'm just simply giving you suggestions that, again, I have heard that have worked for other people, and then, of course, have worked for me, too. And if you're a person learning a language, and you're frustrated, man, you just feel like, oh my goodness, oh, I've learned so much about it. I know the verbs. I know all of this. I know the grammatical structure. You know so much about it, but you're just having a hard time with the vocabulary, so you feel like you're being stymied in a way. You're being hindered by your lack of vocabulary. I understand that, and I appreciate your struggle. I can. But I'm telling you right now, when you start doing this, it's going to take your understanding of the language to the next level, man. I'm telling you. I'm going to say this again, and if I continue to make these kinds of videos, I'm probably going to say it a million more times, so I hope you don't get tired of it. But if I've done it, if my girlfriend has done it, if my brother has done it, if freaking Pope Francis has done it, if a language professor was able to do it, you're able to do it too. I promise you that. You can do it too. And if vocabulary is an area you do lack in, I hope that the suggestions I have given you here in this video will help you. Personally, I think they will. This isn't just a crapshoot. I think they'll help you, because this is a great way to expose your mind to how a native speaker speaks if you can't actually go to the country that speaks the language. I know I keep using country and region interchangeably, and I know it's not quite the same thing, so I hope I'm not offending anyone. But yes, the important thing here is that if you want to continue learning the language, find something that works for you. Find something that helps you grow your vocab. If it's flashcards, do flashcards. If it's the music suggestion, do the music suggestion. If it's something completely different entirely, do that. If it works for you, do that, okay? And don't let yourself quit. If this is something you really want to do not let yourself quit. Please don't let yourself quit, because you're going to regret it even more if you quit, okay? If you decide to continue learning the language, I hope that it goes well for you, and I hope that you're able to learn everything you want to learn, and I hope that it's a very fruitful process for you. And I hope to hear you talking about quantum physics in 3 months, all right? So, if you guys like this video, please let me know by saying something in the comment section, or liking the video, or sharing it with your friends, whatever. If you feel like you have some suggestions for me, please feel free to let me know that too, okay? So I'm making these videos for whoever needs it, all right? So, yeah, I'll leave you guys with that. So I hope the process goes well for you, and I'll see you guys next time.